Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Becoming a TechnoWizard. So I've been sitting here for the past I don't know, 10 minutes trying to work up the energy to talk about my portfolio because that's what I wanted to woke up this morning. I was like, I need to do a video because I missed one yesterday and a couple of days, but I was gonna do a long video, talk about my portfolio and everything like that. But I just been working on it so much these last few days, few weeks really, that I feel like I need to talk about something else and take a little break for myself. So I wanted to talk about at one point this uh, compendium, I guess, uh, of an article talking about you know the guide to design has a whole bunch of resources showing just things to look at. A lot of these links I've seen throughout the Flatiron course, but it's cool that it's all um, brought together in one guide. So I was thinking about going to that, but then I was like, I want that to be a series where, you know, kind of like me relearning everything I just learned. I think that would be an interesting way for me to solidify what I know and what I learned, as well as just share the beginning of my journey because I didn't think to do this until probably like the third phase of Flatiron. So I was like already went through a lot of the fundamentals. Um, So I think doing a series, going back to the beginning would be really cool. Um, Maybe not as real per se as learning about it for the first time, but I think it'll be interesting nonetheless. Another thing I wanted to go over was this case study factory. Yet another, yeah, it's by the same people, UXdesign.cc. Um, a really good article my friend keeps telling me to read about the problem with these formulaic case studies and stuff like that, and how to um, really stand out with your case study, at least things to consider and stuff like that. But again, I just don't have the energy right now, and I don't want to go into that stuff with low energy like I am right now. um so I don't know, but I do know I want to do a video. um so I guess I'm just going to talk about whatever. um Saying I'm a lot, sorry. But yeah, things that I'm just gonna talk about things that were exciting that's been exciting me lately, right? Um, Geez, need to stop with that filler words. So, a couple things I've been thinking about that have been really exciting outside of design, but still related to design because nowadays everything is design in my head. But so a couple things is uh, some of the biggest things I've been looking at is, sorry, I'm sitting very awkwardly right now, trying to catch the sun. Some of the things that have arrested my attention, things I've been looking at a lot, is this game called Ashes of Creation. It's an MMORPG, and for those that don't know, MMORPGs have been in a slump these past few decades, really. This past specifically last 10 years, ever since WoW. After that, it's been after World of Warcraft, there hasn't really been a whole lot of really good ones out there. It's been Guild Wars 2 has been the major thing. After that, there is um I don't even know. My problem is that I haven't been able to play very many MMOs. Um and even the ones that's out there that's big now, like Elder Scrolls Online, Black Desert, um what else is there? I guess Final Fantasy. Want to count that? Final Fantasy, was it 14 or something like that? Um, there might be a few other ones I'm missing, but even the ones out there now, like a lot of people recognize that they don't feel the same as when MMOs were really super popular and really amazing and stuff like that, right? Um, there's a number of reasons why, but what excites me about Ashes of Creation is that for me personally, it's going to be my first time, one of the first times where I really get to jump in an MMO community, or at least an MMO from the beginning, from the beginning of the hype, right? I missed the train for WoW. I was like, I didn't really start playing games, didn't really have my own computer to play games until 2014. 2014. And before that, I used my dad's computer. Uh, and I was like the only computer my entire family had. It was like six of us, siblings, and well, eight in all, like the parents and everything like that. So everybody was using that one computer. um, and my dad, he had this whole thing where he didn't want to download anything because he thought you downloaded anything, you get viruses. It's like instantly, right? So the only games I would play were games that either he would get on CD, on a, like, the actual CD. So like, I mean, it was good games like Quake. Uh, Let me see, what was the other one? Um, the missing Doom. Doom was a big one. I didn't play a lot of that because it was scary for me. But big one I played was Star Wars. Star Wars. I forgot which one it was. Shoot, I forgot which one it was. But it was really interesting because they had like your morals, I guess. Not really morals, but like you can choose what side of the force you'll be on. Um, and that would replicate. It would reflect like your lightsaber would be purple or blue or red, depending on what side of the force you on, and the actions you were doing and stuff like that. So what type of Jedi you were, or Jedi or Sith or whatever, will reflect your decisions in the game, stuff like that. People that know Star Wars probably know exactly what I'm talking about, but it was very interesting. That was pretty cool. Another game I was into was a browser based games. I was only really able to play browser based games, and because we didn't have a great computer, I was only really able to play things like Adventure Quest Worlds. Adventure Quest Worlds was actually pretty cool for me because um, I started playing in like ninth grade or so, like that. But it was really cool because they had a very unique, not just aesthetic, but also it didn't take itself too seriously, right? So they were often very funny. It was very, uh, I don't know, just intriguing, right? They would tell the whole thing was like a joke almost. Um, I mean, it was designed for kids, but it was still very. There was a lot of like mature themes and mature kind of jokes that you would get. So if you're into other things like, I don't even know, I'm not gonna give examples, but Adventure Quest Worlds, very very interesting, very uh, funny little game, and yeah. Another game I was into, let me see, Crystal Saga. That was a pretty crap game, but it's like the only other browser-based games that were really out there at the time. Um, that was interesting. Let me see. It's probably like the main stuff I played. Once I got my own gaming computer, though, I went back and played like things like Rift. Played that a little bit. Played Terra for a long time. Not a long time, but I went back and leveled a couple characters to max and everything like that. It wasn't the same as if I had played it when it was really popular, but it was still moderately popular when I played it. Um, I really liked the action combat. It was really cool. They had really cool set designs and everything like that. The quest was kind of dumb. Like a lot of it didn't take itself too seriously either, but a lot of them were just kind of annoying. A lot of the typical fetch quests and everything like that. And it's weird because Adventure Quest Worlds had like the same kind of issues with like fetch quests and things that like were kind of pointless, kind of grindy. But because Adventure Quest Worlds had a quirky, really quirky personality, it was kind of fun to do them. So when they said, fetch, they would have things like kill, 20 wolves or whatever, right? It would be self-aware. It would know like, hey, this is like the standard, MMO activity that you do, get those wolf fells and everything like that. Um, but Terra, it was just it knew it was it didn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, it was just like it still made you do fetch quests, and it didn't really have too many reasons or jokes around it and everything like that. It just felt grindy at a point. Um, Guild Wars 2 is pretty cool. Okay, my feet are like really hot. Sorry, y'all. It's like 100 degrees, or it's going to be 100 degrees out, and I feel like the air just warming up. I try to do this early in the morning, but it's not that early. I don't know where it's to sit. I don't want to go inside because people sleep. They'll be talking and stuff. Um, but yeah. But anyways, scooch past all that stuff. Ashes of Creation, right? So Ashes of Creation excites me because they're really going for like these ambitious ideas, and they seem to be on the right track to really accomplishing them. They have a lot of gameplay that they show. They just released 2 hours of straight unedited gameplay. Not afraid to like just sit around and just be talking. Just like they didn't try to cover up what they had and what they didn't have. They showed the bugs. They showed the things that's not working. It's in pre-alpha right now, right? Um, they showed all the quirky things. They didn't try to play act and fake role play and stuff like that. They just had fun with it, right? And that was very endearing. And then the CEO was going around, doing AMAs with streamers, like hour-long, 2-hour-long AMAs. So really got into a lot of different, a lot of details to different things, and there's a lot of exciting things about it. But as always, I have my own ideas for something I want to build, and seeing things like Ashes of Creation makes me more uh more confident that I will be able to one day get do my own MMO and just make my own games as ambitiously as I'm thinking. Because this dude, who started it, he say retired at like 29, right? Um, People say, not gonna go into that, but he was likely able to retire because he was a salesman. He did some really big deals and stuff like that. But he's not like a technical person per se. He just played MMOs a lot, like Lineage Age or whatever. I don't really know that one. Um, but he played MMOs himself. He really enjoyed the series, and like all MMO fans, he's been really fed up with the state of MMOs today, with how so many games come out and they promise. Oh my goodness, sheesh, it's getting crazy out here, y'all. I might have to go. But yeah, so many games come out and they promise all these things, and then they just crush your dreams and your hopes, right? um Not gonna get to that too much, but that's a whole thing right there. um so this dude, he's not technically savvy. He's just he lives in San Diego. He's connected with a lot of game developers, so he reached out to these people and was like, hey, let's do a game together. Let's make a game together. It's his first game um that he's creating, and he seems to have assembled a really talented team. um and he just has a vision. He has a vision for what he wants to accomplish, to the ambitions that he wants to live up to, and everything like that. And it's really cool seeing this game develop. I've been watching it on and off for the past 5 years or so. Well, not 5 years, probably 3 years, I want to say. But I've been watching it on and off, right? And seems to be close, relatively close to release. They're gonna have closed alpha later this month. I mean, not this month, this year. And some say they're probably gonna release next year or 2022. So not like impossibly long away, far away, like Elder Scrolls 6. But it's happening, and it's inspiring to see that. So yeah, that's one thing that's been really exciting for me. Some other things that have been exciting is podcasts. Been listening to some really cool podcasts, and gonna completely switch streams right now. Switch topics. But I mentioned a little bit about let me drink some water real quick. I mentioned a little bit about this podcast that went on talking on the subject of urbanization, of civilization rather. Um, this dude wrote a book called Civilized Death, and in the podcast they were talking about how a lot of the things that we take not advantage of, but I guess take advantage of. There's another word I was looking for, but a lot of things that we consider civilization today, and a lot of the assumptions that we have for where society was in the past is kind of wrong. To the extent that we often talk about our history and our past as like, hey, these people were living in squalor at the time. They were living miserable lives. They were dirty. um, they died early, stuff like that, right? And every time we talk about um, where society was before industrialization, we have these assumptions. But when people are looking at the data and they're actually looking at how the quality of life for these people, and we can trace that through just various archaeological uh, remains, like the health of like everything from teeth to bones and everything like that. Like they can see like the quality of life a lot of people lived in, as well as recorded history. You know, and when they actually review all this information, all these facts from the past, we actually see that a lot of our stuff is wrong. A lot of our assumptions is wrong. So we say that a common thing you hear is that people had a much lower life expectancy. Like they were dying in their 30s or 40s or 50s or something like that, right? And this is just patently wrong. Our life expectancy has actually stayed very constant for thousands of years. Um, like people will live regularly into their 70s or 80s, um, maybe even longer than that. But what people don't get about the stats here is that when they throw these stats around about life expectancy, what they're actually doing is conflating things like infant mortality into life expectancy. So if there were a lot of you know cases of child death where infants would die very early age, even either at birth or soon after that, that will go into the same calculation as life expectancy. So that would bring down the average. um, another problem with these stats is that they would um, include things like dying from war or anything like that. So there were like a lot of battles. Um, I mean, pretty much like now, but before guns and everything like that, a lot of people, just had different wars and everything like that. People would go out. Sorry for the shadow. Sheesh. I might have to move around, man. But people would go out, right? And they would, for instance, war with neighboring people. And maybe they might die at a relatively early age, like in their teenage years. They would go out and do battles and stuff like that, right? And don't get me wrong, that was bad. Like I don't want to be in that position now. But they were kind of conflating this with, you know, life expectancy. Like when people think of life expectancy, they're not really thinking about, oh, I could die by a car crash, at 20, right? They're thinking of it in terms of, if I live a good life, I can live up until this age, and then my body will kind of give up on itself, right? That's what the kind of the average perspective of this idea of life expectancy is. So for us to conflate all these other modes of death, all these other causes of death into this um, same name, same range, same idea is just wrong. It gives a very gross misinterpretation of what life was like back then. Yes, there were a lot of ways to die, like from diseases, from again, battling war, from actually that's the main problems right there. Is that the two main ways people died, I believe, from back then was like diseases and war. And today, main people die from diseases and accidents like car crashes and suicide. So the leading causes of death, the top three leading causes of death is depression, people dying from suicide or overdose, or that's the same thing, but uh, and then there's car accidents. Then there is things like heart disease and cancer and all that. Well, not cancer itself, but like in the like cancer is pretty serious, but in terms of the top three ways to die, it's just one of the many conditions people die from. So heart disease, other circulatory problems, lung diseases, in addition to all the different types of cancers and all that. So we're not far removed from back then. That's what people don't realize. And again, so looking at the data, we see that their quality of life was actually pretty good. Um, People could live, the same amount of time we live, like 70s, 80s. People could live to maybe even 100, right? And people live much healthier lives. This we can definitely see is that they didn't have all these heart diseases and stuff like that, right? They lived much, much healthier lives because they were on diets that we as an animal, as a species, evolved to live, so to live on. And people again don't realize that we are animals. Just because we can talk and communicate with each other doesn't mean that we're not an animal. It doesn't mean that we're like, I don't know, an alien or something, which is technically still an animal but from another planet. Like we have a kind of arrogance today of our our reality is, of what our position is on this earth. We see ourselves as apart from nature, as kind of stewards, not even stewards, unfortunately. We see ourselves very negatively. A lot of times we see ourselves as parasites, um, and or we see ourselves as just above nature, right? Um, like we have this idea of everything that we do, like technology is unnatural, right? Like this, like don't use GMOs because it's unnatural. But we are from nature. We are the result of nature. We are a process of nature. We are born, we are living in it, we are still it, right? We just have we have learned to use nature in a different way than any other animal has used it before. And this comes with its own responsibilities. This comes with its own pros and cons. And we need to start realizing, you know, what this means for us. It doesn't mean that we should see everything we're doing as a bad thing, nor as a good thing. We should see what we're doing as a part of the process, as part of the cycle, and understand how to balance, what we're doing. So a good example of that is a lot of civilizations before, a lot of nations, societies. I don't want to say tribes because these are pretty advanced people for their time. They used to have a very good understanding of cycles. Um, for instance, the most really you can say the most efficient way of living was a nomadic lifestyle, where large bands of people, really big family groups, right, would roam the land, um, across a country, across a landscape, or whatever, and they would well live as you would imagine a nomad lives. So you would go to a piece of land, you would settle down for a period of time, maybe a few seasons. You would plant your crops and everything like that. Not even actually no, not that not that part. But it was a hunter gatherer culture, right? So a lot of the people in the village would settle down. They would gather a lot of food. Primarily women would go out and gather most of the food, while primarily men will go out and hunt for meat and stuff like that, right? And because of this way of living, you actually had a more uh, egalitarian standpoint, right? So women were not seen as lesser than or weaker or anything like that. They just had their own set of strengths, right? Um, and that's important to realize that it's important to realize that women actually brought most of the protein home, right? When you're gathering food, you're you're able to get a lot more resources than if you're trying to go out and hunt something that you have to uh, track it for a span of time. Like you have to track one thing for hours or even days at a time, and then kill it and then bring it all the way back, right? You're not going to get a whole lot of protein. That's why meat was a luxury. Meat was not something that we were just eating every single day, in large portions. That's why it was naturally balanced in our diet. Um, and in hunter-gatherer cultures, I say this is very efficient because we've done it for thousands of years. If it wasn't efficient, we would have did something else. Um, but it was pretty efficient because of that. Now, a lot of the we can actually track a lot of the problems in our current society down to the creation of agriculture, of selling down on one piece of land, and just farming that land, right, year after year, decade after decade. The problem with that is it kind of made us think that we are divorced from nature, that we had mastery over nature, that we can plant this one food that we want or a set of foods, and we would always have it. We would put it in store, right, and we could not just save for the winter, for the upcoming winter, but we could save for for multiple winters to come, and then we can sell our 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 extra stuff, and we can get some other things that we can trade for other things that weren't there. Now, people did trade before. They did a lot of trade before. People did store things before and all that stuff. And I'm not going to say agriculture was evil, right? It had its own pros and cons. The problem with it is that we never really stopped to consider those cons. We just kept seeing the pros, right? Just kept saying, "Oh, I can store my food. I can, sell this extra food. I can make more money. I can own the land," right? This idea of owning the land has been a major source of our arrogance, a major source of thinking that we are above nature. So, um, and my personal theory is that this is what introduced us to the idea of also owning people, of thinking that, because we own this land, this property, that we own everything on it. And that my family, my wife, that belongs to me, as the owner of this land, right? And of course, you can see where this is going. This is why my theory is that agriculture introduced these less egalitarian ideas. Before that, in hunter-gatherer cultures, you didn't own the land. You knew you were just on the land. It was land, right? You used it, and then once you noticed, you weren't getting the same amount of crops, or you knew, a big weather thing was coming, like a big storm, not even a big storm, but a big, really bad season of dryness or anything like that was coming on, you would move on to the next area, right? And behind you, they often had like cattle. They had, um, other, animals and stuff like that that would, just fertilize the land. And so behind them, it was like going through a cycle of resurgence, of replenishment. You had this understanding that this was not your land. This was just, you're just like any other animal. You're just using it, right? You use the resources and you pass on to the next area, and you just keep moving. You keep learning. You keep gaining new wisdoms about the lands around you. You can pass that wisdom on to your other groups around you, to your family, to your friends, and even to other people. They saw other people around. They were We estimate that there were around 7 to 9 different hominids. So not just Homo sapiens. There was the Denisovans or something like that, or the Neanderthals. All these other types of hominids that existed around that same period of time, hundreds of thousands of years ago, on up to I think about 100,000 years ago. Not just in Africa, but around the world. But so, you see these different types of people, and you would just keep it moving. You would communicate with them. Sometimes you would integrate into their culture, or really you would battle. You know, well, if you couldn't communicate, if you couldn't agree on, your areas, you probably battle. The winner or the loser would integrate into the winner's culture, or the winner would just pass on, and that other one would just, stay in their little corner. So a good example of this is the Bantu, as their migrations through Africa. They often had the superior technology. They had the superior, um, um, uh, I think pastoralization is the word, but they had abilities to, establish a not exactly a farm because it wasn't permanent, but a way to grow crops quickly. Um, they had these different ways of using the water system, of irrigating and stuff like that. They had ways of establishing a town and then uprooting it. A few seasons later, they had better weapons and all that stuff. They had a very integrating friendly. They had a very diversity friendly culture. So every time they came against a new tribe, not a tribe, but a new nation of peoples, right? Uh, they would trade with them. They trade knowledge, trade resources, and all that stuff, right there. And we can see this with our agriculture data and stuff like that. So across the world, there was this understanding of balance. There was this understanding of cycles. But when we started, creating cities, when we started creating agriculture, we started to think ourselves above this balance, this cycle. And so now we come to this point where most people don't even understand the idea of death very well, right? We have this. A lot of people fear the idea of death and have never seen death, right? So they don't know. A lot of people have this. This is really said really well in I think a Ribbon Farm article by what's his name, Venkatash Rao, if that's his name, if I said it correctly, but I forgot the exact term that he used. But we have essentially a very small window of awareness, right? Where this window is where the products enter and the products leave. Like a product enters here, we use it, and then the product leaves. That's that's it. So a lot of us have this idea of, we get this new thing, our shirt, this shirt, for instance, we buy this shirt from a store, and after the shirt gets too small, gets ripped up, or just gets old, we throw it away, and that's it. That's all we know of what happens about that shirt. We don't think of how that shirt was made. We don't think of the manufacturing facilities that made the shirt. We don't think of the people that worked on the shirt. We don't think of where they sourced the materials for the shirt, and um, what they had to do to get those materials out of wherever it was, right? And afterwards, we don't think of where the shirt goes. We don't think of, what happens when it's in the trash. We don't think of, how it gets reused, or if it gets reused afterwards. We don't think of any of that, and that's a huge problem, because when you take that idea of where, that limited view of products like a shirt or food, or expand it out to every single part of society, you start to realize the problem of this ignorance, of this arrogance, of you know just thinking that we're above nature. We are still in nature. We have just become blind to our own nature. And it's unfortunate because, that has led to us really seeing as ourselves very negatively. Like um we have record numbers of, I want to say, what's the term, anti-anthropomorphism or whatever, not anti, but people who just kind of hate on humans, right? Like whenever you see, this is a big problem with science fiction. I think I talked about this a lot. Yeah, I talked about this in the episode with the Founders Fund, right? Where our science fiction is post-apocalyptic, almost always now. Like we rarely ever have things like the Jetsons or Star Trek and stuff like that. Um, and even though they had these same problems, they had these same problems in the 60s and the 50s and or even the 70s, when a lot of these science fiction was created. um, it has gotten to a point right now, right? It has gotten to a climax. And we see this with our society. We see record high numbers of people not trusting the government, or people wanting to trust the government with no questions asked. um, of people, uh, thinking that the world's coming to an end, right? And people always, there were some people that always had this idea throughout the ages, but now record numbers of people are having these fears, of having this anxiety, and that is because we have most people don't have this idea of what nature is, and what cycles are, what seasons are, what um the process is for something to come into their life and then for it to leave afterwards. We don't think about what had to die for us to get, the food on our table, or even the resources like the housing, the clothes that we wear, and all that stuff. We don't think about what had to die, what had to be um, uh, broken up, what had to be mined, what had to be, um, extricated to come into our lives, and where it goes afterwards. We don't think about, how our products are polluting, this, that, and the other. I mean, now we think about it. We think about it in a general sense of, oh, there's pollution. But on the individual level, a lot of people don't really think about what happens to their stuff afterwards or before. And that's a huge problem. All right. You can go on and on about these problems. But I just wanted to point out the core of it, because I don't think the core is, you know, like you would hear the core is uh, capitalism, or the core is um, socialism, or these high level abstract ideas, right? It's not that. It's a very fundamental problem. The first principles, right? First principles isn't capitalism, isn't socialism, it isn't I don't know, uh, overindulgence of modern day lifestyles. It isn't um, comfort or wanting to be comfortable all the time. It's this problem of simply that we think we're above nature, that we think we are not of nature, that we don't see how nature works anymore. It's a very fundamental thing. That's an evolutionary idea. And most of us, even those that realize evolution is real, don't understand how evolution works. And even though the people back then probably didn't think about evolution from a scientific standpoint, they had an intrinsic idea of change and of adaptation. Nowadays, when things change, we a lot of people worry that things are changing too fast, right? That our society is changing, this, that, and the other, that blah 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 blah. But people back then, they knew everything changes. Seasons come, seasons go, things come and go. Resources, um, animals, their lives, all that stuff, right? And we have divorced ourselves from this problem. So we have ourselves evolved along a different path for the past hundreds of years, right? Since agriculture, and it's been reinforced by cities, It's been reinforced by industrialization. It's been reinforced by digitalization, right? Um, so now we need to, now that we have come to this climax, we need to think about how to adapt in a better way, because we can't go back. There is no going back. Evolution doesn't go back, right? It might like have some retracings that seems like it's going back to a certain, thing that was more efficient before, but it doesn't literally go backwards, right? It's always going forward. It's like because evolution is a process of change and adaptation. So we need to learn how to do that with our society, with our civilization. um so yeah, that's basically it. I can go into the solutions because, as always, I always have solutions and ideas. Let me see what somebody's on me. 1 second. Think about that, right? I might have to end it here, but I don't want to. So I don't want to leave you with the problems, right? I love, talking about solutions and whatnot as well. So what are some solutions? What are some ways that we can, adapt? What are some ways that we can uh, learn from the mistakes that we've done? Learn from the mistakes of us, of assuming, certain things, and how can we look back at how societies used to function? How can we take the lessons and the wisdoms that of hunter gatherer cultures and incorporate that into modern day culture, right? Because there's no way we're going to go back to a time where we're all migratory, just roaming the earth or anything like that. Maybe when we start living in space, we can get back to that sort of lifestyle. But even then, it's going to be unlikely if we keep on with this idea of, industrialization to the point where, we see ourselves more as parasites rather than symbiotic animals, right? So for me, let's see if I can sit down because my arm hurting now holding this big old laptop up. I should have did this on my phone. It's the lighting, man, the lighting. Okay, so for me, when we look at our problems, I see a lot of the issues stemming from this idea of, once again, a limited window of where things come from and where things go. We no longer think in terms of cycles very often. Um, we're starting to realize, there are certain cycles. We see this in our financial institutions. We see this in weather patterns. We see this in even disease, like this pandemic. We notice that, there seems to be a major pandemic every 100 years and stuff like that, right? Um, but in the rest of our lives, we don't often see this. So, but we do see this in things like, entertainment, seasons for shows, movie series, um, music albums, right? Even our technology, they upgrade. But it's not really a season. It's not really a cycle. It's usually like a staircase, right? It's kind of how we see it. But so if we take a look at the modern day versions of cycles, right? Um, maybe we can apply that to the rest of our lives. So, for example, take and this is coming off the cuff because I do have some other ideas, but this one just popped up, so I want to explore it. Um, so take episode seasons, right? We all binge watch things. Um, we know that for a season, for an episode or a new series comes out, and it has a storyline arc, and then at the end there's a cliffhanger, and then there's another storyline arc, you know, and goes like that. And usually the best stories are the ones that go sort of in a circle. The great heroic journey, where you start at one point, you go through these problems and you go through these difficulties. You have this other point that's completely opposite of where you were before. And then you keep going, you keep maturing, and then you come back to your hometown. You come back to where you were before, but with a greater idea, a greater mindset, more wisdom, right? That's usually like the best kind of stories. We usually see that cycle pretty much everywhere. Um, so I wonder, can we think of technology the same way? Because technology is simply the application of our adaptability. And so I'm thinking that maybe we can start viewing technology as less of a upward slope or downward slope, and more of a cycle. So we have this problem that we want to solve. We solve it with this technology. Um, we use that technology to solve these different problems in related fields, right? And it goes all the way around to where the point where we created this technology is now you know almost completely opposite of where that technology is used today. And then we keep using it. We keep maturing that use of that technology, and to the point that we get right back to where the original reason why we created that technology. But now we have a better wisdom of how we can use that. So a more, um, I guess, realistic example of that could be with smartphones or with phones in general. So we had we came up with this idea of a telegram, phonograph, or whatever, to communicate with people who live far away, right? Who are distant from us. We can't. It takes them. Maybe it takes too long to get to them. Maybe we don't have the time to uh, to see our family or friends or whatever. We want to communicate with them more quickly, no matter the distance. So we created that. It's very, very onerous, very complicated piece of technology. Um, Uses a number of wires and everything like that to do it, and it wasn't very good. um, but as we worked on it, we were able to make it more efficient, so that you can communicate with multiple people in your house. You can have different phone lines and all that stuff. And then we made them mobile, so now you don't even need a cord. You can just communicate with people, and it just bounces off satellites or whatever. Um, you can communicate with people wherever you are, wherever they are. It doesn't matter where they are. They don't have to be close to a landline. They don't have to be close to some other thing. You can just communicate them with wherever. Um, but now we use those same devices to communicate asymmetrically. And what I mean by that is videos, movies, media streamlines. Sorry, there's a helicopter right over here. Sheesh, let me pause this. Sheesh, helicopter. All right, so yeah, so now we communicate asymmetrically um, through media and all this stuff. So we can make a post, and somebody some indiscriminate amount of time, and we just communicate it. That's almost a complete opposite of where we were before. Like before, we thought we could do real-time communication. That's the most important use of mobile of a cellular device, of a telegraphic device. um, but now we realize that we can use this same idea, the same technology, to communicate with somebody, in the future. you know, we don't even know. We don't even need to know who we're talking to. Like me, I'm making this video right now, and I have no idea who's gonna see this, who's gonna hear this, and I have no idea when they will see or hear this. But I know somebody probably might, maybe will. So I didn't go with this with the intent of talking to somebody instantaneously for this one for because something was to to translate this communicate specific thing. I just started talking, and with the assumption that one day, sometime, somewhere, somebody else will get this communication. And so this idea of a telegraphic device has evolved into you know um, a something with much wider use, right? And so now, as we keep using this thing, um, we're going back to the point where we just want our phones to um, communicate with other people, right? Like there's this whole movement of like a dumb phone, of phone that you only use to communicate with somebody, uh, and we're doing this with the greater realization of, you know, there's a lot of obstacles in the way of communicating with somebody in real time. Sometimes uh, they won't have like this a signal, right? And so we use multiple types of signals. You can use cell towers, or you can use radio signals, or you can use the internet, right? These are three different types of technologies, all for the same purpose of communicating with somebody. And so uh, we see this technology as a sort of evolutionary cycle, you know, going around. So my idea is that we also, see these other types of technologies the same way. So, for instance, your clothes, your and stuff like that. We don't very much think of these in the cycle of a something that we're improving upon. We just see, we wear something, and when it gets old, we throw it away. Well, that's a whole different thing, because same problem with technology, with like a smartphone or something like that. We use it, we throw it away afterwards, or the cell phone. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it was an interesting observation nonetheless. I don't know, something I'll come back to later. Uh, ooh, so I'm sorry if that was a tangent and that ain't going anywhere. But I think it was an interesting observation. I'm definitely going to revisit it at a later point. Um, but I'm glad I did it anyways. That's the fun of having like videos that nobody watches. You can just say whatever. I'm still gonna share this too, just like this, because this is hilarious. I want people to see that this technology, this is what it's used for now. You know, we can speak into the ether, and with the hopes that one day somebody else would laugh at the same jokes, will laugh at me, at us, making a fool of ourselves in a good way. It's not like I'm trying to do something stupid, or at least I don't think so. Yeah. So I'm just gonna put that aside for now, because I don't know where I'm going with that. But I did have some real solutions that I did think through prior to this video, and it was things I wanted to talk about in the podcast before. So, in relation back to the cycle thing, though, I do think we can use technology in a cyclical pattern, and I think the key to that is actually separating us from a grid. So we oh, maybe that's connection right there. Look at it. I'm trying to let me can I work through this? I don't know. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking, right? Um, we created cities and grids to share resources. So before, you collected something, you were able to store a certain amount of grain, say, in your store. Or before that, in hunter-gatherer cultures, you only really stored things that you would use that same day or that same week or that same season, maybe even. But you wouldn't store a whole lot, because you had to get moving again. And then when we settled down, we realized that we can store a lot more things for a longer time. And so we started having, large granaries, warehouses, where we stored a whole bunch of resources for a long time. Um, and then we realized that we didn't have to, we could store not just food, but we could kind of store things like water. You know, we always store water in like little containers or jugs or anything like that, or big, water buckets on your horse or a camel or whatever. But now we realize we can make an entire bathhouse. We can make an entire, um, central water fountain for drinking water. We realize we can store a lot more stuff. Same thing for energy. We realized that we could, you know, create a windmill, or not a windmill, a water mill, right? And that would generate energy. And before it was for very mechanical means, but other stuff later. Energy was always a tough part of storing. One of the hardest things to store, but we figured out different ways to do it. So now we all live on a multi-level grid where we store our water in a way that is um, connected to our greater community, but we don't realize how it is connected, right? Most of us don't think about what happens, like where we got the water when we turn on the sink, or where the water goes when it goes down the sink or the toilet, right? Um, and that becomes a problem because when we are using vast quantities of these resources, we have to think about where it's coming from and where the waste is going. Because, we already know that in nature, there's only a certain amount of resources. So if you use a whole, for instance, let's simplify this, right? If you're a hunter-gatherer culture, you come across a body of water, say a pond. You know that you can use this water for bathing, maybe even drinking water. Um, Maybe they realize that this type of water, they get sick from it, so they got most of their water from a river. Either way, they come across a body of water, they use that water, you know. But because they were in front of this body of water, they can see what happens to the water. So if you're in front of a pond of water, you realize that over time the pond will shrink. It will get smaller and smaller as you use more and more water and you don't replenish it. So they will realize, hey, this watering hole, or whatever, it's getting low. We have to do something about it. You have to move on. You have to find some way to replenish it or something. You have to do something with it. Um. So, but now we use water and we don't know where it's coming from. So we're not thinking about what happens when the pond gets low. As you, I think you can see where I'm going here with this, because we don't see where things are coming from. We don't think about the state of that thing, of the state of that source. And so when we come across um what's the term, like a drought or something, right? It's much more impactful. It's much more of a problem because it kind of comes on us like a truck, right? Just out of nowhere. You open up the sink, no water comes out. Right? Usually this is a problem before that happens. Usually it's a problem where, the people who do think about where the water is coming from, they say, hey, water's running low. They're gonna have to limit you all. People are like, what? Limit us? For what? People get all in a tizzy. Why are you intruding on my rights to use my water? Right? It's not, that's the problem. It's not your water. It's from nature. It's from some source, some quote unquote pond. And it's simply going through, we simply created ways for that water to come to your house, and you're paying for that service. And so when that water runs out or gets low, we have to think about how to do it. It's not infinite. And if you don't realize that it's not infinite, you're gonna think that you deserve that it's your privilege, or not. You don't even see it as a privilege. You think it's that you deserve to have this water. You pay for the you pay for the service of water coming to your house, and so you think that it's your right to have that water. And so therefore, if it's somebody else's problem, right? If that water runs low, they are giving you that service for for um for providing you water, and so you think it's their problem to figure out how to get more water, but it's not. It's your problem too, because if they can't figure it out, if they can't find another source, you're out of water. Um, this might be a hard idea for other people, for people, especially in America, to consider. Um, it's a hard idea for me to consider because I never really had a problem where I didn't get water because the entire state was running low on water. We came close to had some droughts where they were talking about, hey, Lake Lanier is really low right now. You can't be using water to water your grass. But I didn't have a yard we watered at then, so and really I was like, okay. And my problem is much more immediate. My problem is that we couldn't pay for the service to get water in the first place, so I was always thinking about this stuff. But a better idea of this is energy, is electricity, right? Most of us realize that electricity is expensive. You know, at least people that live in pay for their bills, that realize the cost of these bills. Um, they know that, hey, they say turn off the light when you're not using it. It's running up my electricity bill. Maybe that's something that's more common in lower income households. I'm not sure what people talk about middle income households, or or higher, but definitely in lower income households. That's a very well known saying. Don't turn off the lights when you're not using it, right? Because that junk is expensive. You realize that um, you can run out of electricity either because you can't afford the service, or simply because the service is too expensive. Um, and most of us, no matter our income, know that there's blackouts. That something happens, and then boom, entire city is out of electricity. Um, not usually because the source is like limited, is low, but usually because the channels, the the wires and stuff like that, the way for that electricity to get to your house has been cut off somehow. But at least we've experienced limited resources for in terms of energy, in terms of electricity. So another good example of this is food, especially in the pandemic. Most of us now have realized that there is limited amount of food, and so when that store runs out, you ain't gonna have no food. A certain type of food. A lot of us around the world has finally experienced what it's like to have a food shortage. A lot of places have had this, different ways. Um, we've always had the idea of seasonal foods, but especially in America, that idea has been very thin. Um, but this pandemic has helped us realize that things like meat, things like um, just other types of food is limited, right? Like if there's if people eat up all the cows, we ain't gonna have beef, right? And so we realize that we either have to eat less beef, or or invent some new ways of making meat. That's why you have these startups around making artificial meat and stuff like that. Um, so we're starting to realize this idea, this source problem, but we still have this problem of waste. And I'm sorry, I just realized I went deep into the problem issue again. I meant to talk about the solutions. Um, and that happens because in order to come up with solutions, you have to really understand the problem. If you come up with a solution and it's only really solving the symptoms, then you haven't really come up with a solution. You just come up with a band-aid. You just come up with, you know, I forgot the term, but like, with your medicine, if you get a medicine that's only really, solving your symptoms, like a headache or something, you're not really looking at the underlying cause of that headache, then you're just gonna keep on having to take that medicine, and you're always gonna have that headache. You're not really solving the problem. You're not curing the disease. So it's important to talk about what the disease is for our society, and all that I talk about is the disease. So the solution, the cure, I think, is self-sustainability. Is living in a home where we're not connected to a grid. At least not. At least that's not our sole way of getting resources, of getting water, electricity, so on and so forth. I think that if we each have a home where our water is cyclical, so it rains, we get that water there, we use that water, and it's filtered out, and we use it again, right? If we each have one of these filtration systems in our home, we'll have a better respect and idea for where that water comes from. And maybe that's not, super obviously, really, that's not a comprehensive solution, because we use a lot of water. So we're not going to get all of it from rain. However, we can do something like this, either on a house by house basis or a community basis. Like, you live in a central community. You can have a reservoir of water. And that water comes from, either is naturally there, or somebody delivers, a huge amount of water to your home or to your neighborhood. And so everybody living there sees that reservoir water being used, and they see it being replenished, or rather they see it getting low, and they realize, hey, we need to replenish this water. And so, it'll be really expensive to get a whole new truckload of water poured in there. Hopefully people will realize that if they simply, recycle most of the water they use, put it right back into that reservoir, they will save a lot more money. They would, be able to subsist on this single reservoir of water for a long time. And that's important because it give people, it will solve this problem of thinking that we can just use infinite amount of resources. Same thing for electricity, right? So instead of us getting, our power from some grid somewhere else that, some other company just supplies to us, every house or every neighborhood, and I want to cap it at that, because we know that humans can only really understand communities up to around 150 people. Once you get above that, we start abstracting. We start like kind of ignoring the problem, ignoring, those other people. We don't really connect with them. In order for us to connect with this idea of limited resources, we need to limit the resources, limit the cycle of resources, the pool of resources, to a set amount of people, to that magic number of around 100 to 150 people. So that's why I'm saying only a house or a neighborhood. So electricity or energy in general, we can have a central area where that electricity is generated, and we see, how much electricity is there. It has a meter saying how much energy we're generating. Maybe it's solar powered, maybe it's nuclear powered, maybe whatever it is, but we see how much energy we're generating. And when we use that energy, we can see how much energy we're using. You can, maintain privacy so that you only see how much energy, your household is using, whatever. But the point is that we see where, that energy is going. We see that it is being used up. And so when it gets low, or it gets to a certain amount, we know that we need to replenish it. Again, it also gives us a better respect of not just wasting, these resources, not just constantly using it and not really thinking about where it's going afterwards. Because when you see something that's going low, you automatically think about, okay, how do I replenish it? A lot of times we think about maybe we can, put back what we just took. Um, bees everywhere. So this gives us a this allows us to bring back that humility, that societal level humility, that species level humility, that we are a part of nature, that there are limited resources, and that we should constantly think about how to replenish them. Another thing that we can do is with food. I'm getting low on my battery, so I'm gonna have to end it here. But food is another thing. We can have a set amount of food inside of a neighborhood or a household. Everybody has their own like mini farm or mini uh, I forgot what you call it, but food sources. You have that limited amount, and if you're using a farm on the land itself, it should have meters that show you, how that land is being used. So a big problem with agriculture, especially today, industrialized agriculture, is that we're using the land up itself because we're not thinking about, hey, this land, it only has a set amount of nutrients inside of it, inside the soil. And so when you use that soil up, it dries out, becomes like dust, like sand. That's how you get desertification. When you cut down trees and everything like that, then you try to, use that land for cash crops, and use it over and over and over and over again. Eventually, it dries up, and then what? And then you, then you have, you create a desert. A desert is not like a dead space that just always existed. It's an area of land that has been overused or has been dried out. Eventually, it does replenish. It usually takes a long time. Like the Sahara, people don't realize the Sahara was not always a desert. It was a vast grasslands, and um, it was full of like the area. There was a huge like ocean there, and we know this because we see salt water. I mean, we see sea salt in the Sahara. We see whale bones in the Sahara. There was a large, ocean, or at least body of salt water there. There was around it, there was huge grasslands, maybe even forests and stuff like that, and it dried up. So for us to replenish it, we have to also measure. Oh, that's another thing. Like, we know this today in technology and in our businesses, we only improve what we measure. And today we're not really measuring, how we're using our resources. We're not really measuring on an individual level how much water we use, how much electricity, how much land we use, how much nutrients we use, and so on and so forth, right? So if we do that on an individual level, that will give us a much, much, much better society. Because now society is not a huge, amoebic, just ambiguous idea of, infinite amount of resources coming in and just infinite amount of waste going out, not really think about how it's being used. Now, with a self-sustainable, cyclical, distributed, cycle, we each can live life with the full knowledge of how we're living life. We each can fully realize, the how we measure, how we use our resources. We each can fully realize how those resources can be replenished, and therefore we can have a much healthier lifestyle. If we use the same idea for our bodies, for the things that we eat, we can measure what happens when we eat sugars, what happens when we eat too much meat. We can measure how the nutrients is being used in our bodies. We can measure how our immune systems are responding to it. We can measure the nutrients that's being used up inside of our own bodies, and we can see when it gets low and when we have to replenish it. If we measure all these things, we have a much better understanding of our place in nature and how to live in a balanced manner. So yeah, that's my solution right there. And you can go deeper into it. You can reflect it for different parts of society and everything like that. It's highly scalable. The hardest part will be implementing it on a case by case basis. So there are going to be times when, um, actually, I'm gonna get to that in the next episode. You know, how to apply this solution to the real life. Um, but uh, the solution by itself, I think it's a really good, because I've been thinking about it on and off for um, a while now. I say a while because I don't even know when. It's like at first this specific, version of the solution I was talking about, I think last week or so in that podcast I tried to, it wasn't a podcast. It was it was a video I tried to do my phone, but it wasn't recording right. But even before then, I was always thinking about, this idea of cycles, a balance of, being being a part of nature, and realizing how we're a part of nature. I've always been thinking about this for a long time. Uh, like one of the reasons why I wanted to invent hover cars, because I saw it as a self-replicable or a self-sustainable system where you know um, you would see how you get the resources. Um, like we see this even in our cars today, we kind of have this understanding that if the world gets low on oil, you know gas prices will go up and it will be more expensive to drive and so on and so forth. We see like um, the gas coming out of our cars and polluting the atmosphere. We see the difference of when we move, when we go out of nature, out of the city into a spot where it's less urbanized, and we realize that it smells better, um, it looks cleaner, right? We kind of see this, we kind of have this understanding when it comes to oil, when it comes to vehicles. So when I wanted to invent hover cars, I was thinking about it in a similar style of uh, seeing being able to measure the fuel coming into your vehicle, and the impact your vehicle has on the environment and so on and so forth. So yeah, I've had this idea for a long time, but it's really started, I guess, becoming more applicable, or more been able to communicate it in a more efficient manner uh, recently. So that's really cool to see. Um, but yeah, I want to get more into this idea and future videos. I don't know how long this video is, but thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Let me know what you think about this idea about um, MMOs. That was the first thing I was talking about, and whatever else. So yeah, it was fun as always, and this is good. I needed this. Hope you needed this too. But yeah, have a good day, and bye bye.